Hat, sunglasses, Pepsi, notes, sources, thick skin. Check. You already know. Let's go. Welcome to Golden Blue today, everybody. This is a college football channel. So if you like college football, hit the like and subscribe button. It's that simple. Also, send gear to represent your team and be a part of my background forever. All you have to do is send it to P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina 29657. And don't forget to check out our Patreon page. We have a lot of great perks over there. The perk that people seem to enjoy the most, of course, is the score prediction contest where we award $20 every single week to whoever gets closest to the actual score of the game that I pick. We also did a championship week. I will award $25 to that winner. And right now is the best time to join Patreon because we are going to do the bowl prediction contest. First place prize will win $50. Second place prize is an autographed Golden Blue Dude flat bill hat. And the third place prize is a shout out. And the more Patreons we get, the higher we can bump up the prize. So if we get up to $300 worth of Patreon pledges, we will bump up the prize to $75. If we get up to $400 worth of Patreon pledges, we'll bump the prize up to $100, and so on and so forth. So there's even an incentive for current Patreon members to encourage other people to join Patreon. That way the prize goes even higher. I'll leave the link to the Patreon page in the description of this video. Yep, I'm back in the car line waiting for my kids to get out of school. Let's see how this one turns out. Some of them are good, some of them not so good. Hopefully this is a good car video. We've all been trying to figure out what conference is going to last alongside of the SEC and the Big Ten. Those two conferences, they're going to be fine. They're expanding left and right, picking off from the other conferences. So everybody's trying to figure out, is it going to be the Pac-12? Is it going to be the Big 12? Or is it going to be the ACC that survives with those two conferences? Well, let's take a step back, because I think the ultimate goal of all these teams that are in the Pac-12, the Big 12, and the ACC, the ultimate goal is to now get into either the Big 10 or the SEC. Hopefully their conference survives, but man, if they were bumped up into the Big 10 or the SEC, they would be made. They wouldn't have to worry about anything, and they could let the other conferences figure out who's going to survive and who's going to dissolve. So having that in mind, I came up with a list of the 10 teams that the SEC should go after next. Now, I'll have a separate list for the Big Ten because they have different criteria, so different teams would be a better fit for the Big Ten. But these are the 10 teams, really 12 because there was a tie at 10, that I think the SEC should go after next, based on a lot of things. So we will start at the bottom with number 10, which there was a three-way tie for number 10, and it's three schools in the state of Texas: Baylor, TCU, and Texas Tech. First up, Baylor. Baylor has brand new facilities, especially a brand new football stadium, and they have invested a lot into their football brand. And Baylor's brand is the most valuable it has ever been. You know the business motto, buy low, sell high? Well, in college football, it's the opposite. You want to bring in a brand that's at its peak. And right now, Baylor is at its peak. Now, when I say peak, I don't expect it to drop back down. I just think this is the best that Baylor's brand has ever looked, and they would fit quite nicely into the SEC. The next team is Texas Tech. And Texas Tech would grab the western part of the state of Texas for the SEC. I know they already have two schools in Texas and Texas A&M. But if you grab that western part, then you have a major chunk of the state of Texas. And Texas Tech also has a huge alumni base, wealthy boosters, and donors, so they would bring some money to the SEC. They have a massive fan base. And finally, TCU for that final 10 spot. You would wrap up the DFW market alongside of Texas. And TCU's brand has been climbing dramatically from dominating the Mountain West to now making the college football playoffs. And could you imagine if they won the national championship? That would definitely grab the eyes of the SEC. So I think TCU would be a good addition to the SEC. Now let's move on to number 9. At number 9, I have Virginia Tech. Now, for Virginia Tech, it would give the SEC a footprint in a new state, the state of Virginia. And I think Virginia Tech's brand is better than Virginia's for the SEC. Now, for the Big Ten, that's a different story, but for the SEC, I like Virginia Tech better than Virginia. I think it makes more sense. I think Virginia Tech fits perfectly in the SEC, culturally, academically, and athletically. And I do think Virginia Tech would bring money to the SEC. Virginia Tech would be a nice addition to the SEC. Number 8, this is where I have the Miami Hurricanes. They have a big brand. They would add another footprint in the state of Florida. But let's be honest, Miami could cause some problems with existing members. Now, I'm not saying anybody would leave or anything like that, but it would cause some friction, especially with Florida. Florida does not want Miami in the SEC. And don't forget, Miami is a private institution. promotion, so you have to take that into consideration. All that being said, I do think Miami would be a good addition into the SEC. Number 7, this is where things get weird. Number 7, this is where I have Oregon. Yeah, Oregon. They have a national brand. They would stretch the SEC coast to coast. Second largest brand remaining in the Pac-12. And yes, Oregon would bring the SEC money. And that's what it's all about, bringing in money. Hey, the Big Ten has gone coast to coast. Why can't the SEC? I don't think the SEC will go coast to coast. That's not what I'm saying. But I think Oregon would be a good brand, and it would stretch the SEC coast to coast. Number 6, staying out west. We're staying weird. Washington. Yeah, I think Washington is just a little bit better brand if you're going to go to the West Coast. Of course, it would stretch the SEC coast to coast, and it is the biggest brand remaining in the Pac-12, and they have a national championship in the modern era. And Washington looked pretty good this year. They took a step forward, just like I predicted, a 10-2 season, very, very close to getting to the Pac-12 championship. I think Washington would add a lot of value to the SEC. Now let's get into our top 5. Number 5, North Carolina. North Carolina would give the SEC a footprint in a new state, the state of North Carolina. Of course, it is the biggest brand in the state of North Carolina, and the football brand is getting better. But let's be honest, we all know that North Carolina is known for their basketball brand, so they will bring the revenue when it comes to basketball, but it's football that conference realignment is really centered around, and North Carolina is improving their football brand. It is getting better. Number 4, this is where I have Oklahoma State. If the SEC grabs Oklahoma State, that would wrap up the state of Oklahoma when it comes to Power 5 football. Oklahoma State has great football facilities. They have massive boosters and donors. So yes, Oklahoma State would bring in a ton of money for the SEC. Now they've already gotten the biggest brand in the state of Oklahoma, which is, well, Oklahoma. But Oklahoma State is also a massive brand, and it would wrap up the entire state. I think Oklahoma State would be a great fit for the SEC. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the SEC added Oklahoma State in the next round of realignment. Number 3, this is where I have Florida State. Florida State is a national brand and another footprint in the state of Florida, and they wouldn't cause as much issues as Miami would as far as existing members. Multiple national championships. Everybody knows Florida State, and Florida State is on the up and up. Mike Norvell is building something over there in Tallahassee, and Florida State would be a great addition to the SEC. Just like Oklahoma State, I wouldn't be surprised if the SEC added Florida State in the next round of realignment. Number 2, and you're gonna call me a homer for this, West Virginia. Hear me out, guys. If the SEC grabs West Virginia, it would give the SEC a footprint in a new state, the state of West Virginia. West Virginia has one of the best football facilities in all the Big 12. And West Virginia would fit in perfectly in the SEC. And it was between West Virginia and Missouri whenever the SEC was expanding the last go-around. It was going to be Texas A&M and either Missouri or West Virginia. They chose Missouri because of the Kansas City TV market, but I'm telling you, West Virginia would be a great addition to the SEC, and you can't go by the population of the state of West Virginia as far as the size of the fan base, because West Virginia is number 13 as far as the percentage of the fan base living outside of the state of West Virginia. So most of the fan base of West Virginia actually lives outside of the state of West Virginia. You would be picking up a national brand. But this brings us to number 1, and this is a no-brainer. You probably already knew who number 1 was going to be, and that's Clemson. This is a don't even think about it decision. You don't have to think. Clemson would be the best choice. Clemson checks every box for the SEC. They have 2 national championships in the playoff era, and they have phenomenal football facilities. I have seen their football facilities in person, and they are absolutely spectacular. So yes, I 100% expect the SEC to add Clemson during the next conference realignment. Who they add with Clemson, whether it's 2 teams or 4 teams, I think the best bets would be Clemson, West Virginia, Florida State, Oklahoma State, North Carolina, and either Duke or Virginia, just because of a traveling partner for North Carolina. I don't have Duke or Virginia on this list because I don't think they would fit in as good as the rest of these teams. And yes, that is including Washington and Oregon out on the West Coast. But because North Carolina wants a travel partner, they will probably bring in either Virginia or Duke. I'm leaning towards Duke. So y'all let me know in the comments section what you think about my list of the teams that the SEC should go after next. And who do you think the SEC actually does go after next in the next conference realignment? That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you on my next show.